The events I'm about to tell you unfolded during spring break of my junior year of college. My three closest friends, Kevin, Ali, and Seb, and I decided to embark on a car camping adventure in the rugged beauty of Colorado. We've been taking these trips together since our freshman year, but that semester found us all pretty strapped for cash. So instead of a paid campground, we opted for dispersed camping, seeking out a free spot. I discovered the perfect location using one of those camping apps. It was nestled somewhere outside Buena Vista, deep within a national forest, accessible only by a service road that seemed to stretch into eternity. Having camped together countless times, we felt confident in our abilities. We arrived in the late afternoon, finding a secluded clearing beside what appeared to be a long, dry creek bed. Though no water flowed, the faint indentations in the earth whispered of past currents. The isolation was profound. We saw no other campers, not even the faint tracks of recent vehicles. It was precisely the kind of undisturbed wilderness we craved. We pitched our tents in a loose formation, about 15 feet apart, simply choosing the flattest, least rocky patches of ground. I don't recall much about that first night. We likely shared a few beers, played some cards, and were all quite weary from the drive. By 11, we decided to call it a night and retreated to our individual tents. What sticks with me, however, is the unusually heavy sleep that claimed me. It was strange for me to begin with, but especially so on a camping trip. Normally, even in a comfortable bed within a climate-controlled room, I stir multiple times, from a cold, a need to get up, or just general restlessness. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Yet that night, I was utterly lost to sleep, as if plunged into an unnaturally deep slumber, a profound unconsciousness I couldn't explain. When I finally awoke the next morning, an immediate sense of unease settled over me. I unzipped my tent, hoping for a breath of fresh air, and then I simply froze. The sight before me was undeniable, chilling me to the core. All four of our tents had been moved, not just ruffled by the wind or disturbed by an animal, but actually relocated. They now stood arranged in a perfect unsettling square formation around a small mound of stones that had most certainly not been there when we retired for the night. A part of my mind struggled to accept it, convinced I was still trapped in some bizarre dream. The scene was utterly surreal, almost beyond belief. Each tent had been shifted perhaps 20 or 30 feet from its original position, but that wasn't the most disturbing detail. The tent stakes remained perfectly secured in the earth, and nothing inside any of the tents had been disturbed. My sleeping bag lay exactly as I'd left it. My phone was still charging, and all my gear was precisely in place. I checked, then double-checked, then triple-checked my tent. Nothing was missing. I felt a cold dread creeping in, questioning my own sanity. "Hey!" I yelled, my voice cracking slightly, desperate to rouse my friends. Kevin was the first to emerge, and I didn't need to utter a single word to explain. The same profound confusion and disbelief I felt was etched plainly on his face. Ali and Seb crawled out moments later, and as they surveyed our transformed campsite, their reactions mirrored ours. None of us remembered a thing. Then Ali spoke, recounting a strangely vivid dream of walking a lion through some desolate landscape while an unseen presence meticulously counted her steps aloud. Kevin chimed in, revealing his own dream of marching in formation alongside fellow soldiers. Seb and I couldn't recall any dreams, but the unsettling similarity between Ali's and Kevin's experiences struck us as profoundly odd. A strange, almost palpable connection settled between the four of us, difficult to articulate. It was as if we were privy to each other's thoughts, a shared understanding that transcended words. Sure, here it is. It's hard to express the feeling, but it truly felt like we were more intimately linked than we had been the night before, but in a way that felt deeply wrong. I remember my gaze darting between them, desperately trying to comprehend the strange, heavy energy that now enveloped us all. The unsettling sensation was akin to an unseen fifth presence, an entity observing and yet somehow woven into the fabric of our own being. We meticulously scoured the campsite, desperate for any shred of evidence that might illuminate the night's enigma. Kevin, ever the pragmatist, initially proposed a simple explanation. Perhaps we'd overindulged and merely forgotten our own actions. But this rationalization crumbled almost instantly. We discovered distinct drag marks etched into the earth, tracing a path from each tent's original spot to its new, perplexing location. The truly bizarre detail was how these trails abruptly ceased about 10 feet shy of each tent, as if an invisible force had towed them partway, then effortlessly lifted and precisely placed them the remaining distance. Even more peculiar was the cluster of stones at the square's heart. Precisely 4 of them, each precariously balanced atop the next, forming an almost artistic arrangement. Under different circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Kevin, drawn by curiosity, stepped closer. As he leaned in to examine the uppermost stone, his foot caught, and he stumbled, inadvertently disturbing the delicate structure. The stones simply dislodged, rolling gently into the dust. Nothing violent, just a quiet collapse. For a long, tense moment, the 4 of us remained utterly still, our eyes fixed on the now scattered rocks. Then the strangeness escalated, intensifying from a whisper to a scream. Simultaneously, a deep, resonant rumble vibrated through the air, emanating from the distant wilderness. It wasn't the tremor of an earthquake, but something more ancient, like colossal stone portals slowly, reluctantly grinding open. That sound ignited a primal terror within us, sparking an unspoken urgency. Without a single word exchanged, we instinctively began to dismantle our camp. Our minds, already so intimately linked, now shared a torrent of raw emotion. I felt their growing dread, and I knew they mirrored my own. It was profoundly unnerving, a sensation far more terrifying than anything we had experienced just moments before. Never in my life had I disassembled a campsite with such frantic speed. In truth, we vanished from that clearing in less than 5 minutes, but each second stretched into an eternity of desperate haste. I won't dwell on the specifics of what transpired. The memory of that night remains a chilling phantom, a fever dream lurking at the edge of my consciousness, and I fear that too much reflection might solidify it into a terrifying reality. 5 years have passed since then. The 4 of us have drifted apart, as often happens when lives diverge. Kevin settled in Denver after college. Allie is pursuing her studies in California, and I believe Seb relocated to Chicago with his girlfriend. We maintain contact, but the unspoken rule is clear. That bewildering night is a topic we never revisit. My name is Simon, and this particular event unfolded last summer when I was 23. My girlfriend Cadence and I had meticulously planned this camping trip for months. It was meant to be just the 2 of us, a complete escape. No cell service, no distractions. We had been together for about 1.5 years, and to be frank, our routine had become a little stagnant. Nothing covertly negative, just a comfortable predictability. We believed a weekend immersed in the wilderness would rekindle our spark. I selected a location within the Uri National Forest in North Carolina. For weeks, I had scoured online resources, seeking a spot that offered solitude without being utterly isolated. The place I finally settled on was a small campground, roughly 3 miles down a winding Forest Service road. Sure, reviews suggested it comprised only 6 or 7 sites, each generously distanced for privacy. We departed that Friday afternoon around 3, making a quick stop for provisions at a grocery store near the forest entrance, and arrived at the campground just as the sun began its descent. The access road proved challenging, riddled with potholes and loose gravel, but my truck navigated it without issue. As we eased into the main clearing, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. My choice seemed perfect. A few picnic tables were scattered about, along with some fire rings, and the individual campsites were tucked deep enough into the trees to ensure a sense of seclusion. Most spots lay vacant, a welcome sight. We drove past one, noting a blue sedan, but no one was visible nearby. Cadence's gaze landed on a site at the campground's farthest edge, where the track vanished into the woods. It offered a perfect, secluded patch for our tent, nestled deep enough among the trees to completely hide us from any other campers. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. As twilight deepened into dusk, our camp was finally ready. I coaxed a crackling fire to life while Cadence prepared our simple meal. For a precious while, everything felt utterly perfect. We sat, beers in hand, mesmerized by the dancing flames, sharing a quiet presence that spoke volumes more than any conversation. Around 10, Cadence ventured to the nearby spigot to brush her teeth. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. My heart leaped. I hadn't heard a single footstep. He offered a quick apology for startling me, explaining he was the occupant of the blue sedan, merely wanting to introduce himself. He was Aiden, perhaps 30, and his gaze was unnervingly direct. A relentless stare that left me feeling exposed, though I kept my unease hidden. Cadence returned, her stride betraying a quiet irritation at the intrusion. Aiden's attention immediately shifted, his eyes fixing on her. He remarked on our secluded spot, then strangely added he was camping alone to escape people. A peculiar statement given his sudden appearance at our site. From that moment, I ceased to exist for him. His unwavering focus was entirely on Cadence, a detail not entirely unexpected, yet profoundly unsettling. The next few minutes felt like an eternity. He spoke at her, while she offered only hesitant, uncomfortable replies, clearly eager for him to depart. Finally, I interjected, explaining our plan for an early start and our need for sleep. That seemed to break his spell, and he turned to leave. As he melted back into the shadows, I noticed he used no light, simply vanishing into the deep night. It struck me as profoundly strange. Cadence and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement on the unsettling nature of the encounter, and decided to simply put it out of our minds. We sat by the dwindling fire for another hour, then extinguished the last embers and retreated to our tent. Falling asleep felt almost instantaneous, but my awakening was jarring, laced with an immediate, undeniable sense of dread. In a heartbeat, I registered it. Hushed voices, somewhere in the surrounding darkness. A low murmur of conversation that seemed to hover near our tent. Cadence lay peacefully beside me, lost in sleep. A powerful primal instinct surged through me. I didn't hesitate, didn't cower. Instead, a fierce urge to protect propelled me to investigate. I unzipped the tent flap with painstaking slowness. Barely a whisper of fabric. The voices, as if sensing my movement, ceased abruptly. A profound silence descended, heavy and watchful. I snatched my phone, its flashlight beam, cutting through the inky blackness, sweeping across our campsite. But the light revealed nothing. Whoever had been there had vanished. Or perhaps they were always further away than my ears had initially suggested. Eventually, I retreated back into the tent, attempting to calm my racing thoughts. It was a public campground, I reasoned. People often stayed up late. I tried to convince myself it was nothing threatening, just a couple of inconsiderate campers. My only hope was that they'd gotten the message and taken their late-night chatter far from our peaceful spot. The next morning, I kept the incident to myself. There was no need to burden Cadence with pointless worry. We spent the day exploring winding trails, the invigorating hike a welcome distraction that burned away the lingering unease. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with fading light, I headed towards our truck to gather more wood for the evening fire. My eyes caught an unexpected detail on the windshield, a small, folded piece of paper tucked neatly beneath the wiper blade. A chill snaked down my spine as I retrieved and unfolded it. It was a stark, handwritten message. You should move your tent. The words hit me like a physical blow. There was no way I could keep this to myself. I rushed back to Cadence, thrusting the note into her hand, and quickly recounted the unsettling whispers from the previous night. Her eyes widened as she read it, and her voice, tight with apprehension, immediately questioned if Aiden was responsible. Who else could it be? I replied, the frustration rising within me. We were still reeling, our nerves fraying, when, as if summoned by our growing unease, Aiden materialized at the edge of our campsite. He wore the same clothes as yesterday, and his presence ignited a volatile mix of fury and apprehension deep within me. My anger flared, overpowering my fear. I confronted him sharply, demanding he stop his unnerving habit of appearing without warning. I was certain he was behind the strange occurrences, and I wouldn't let him pretend otherwise. He offered a terse apology, claiming he was merely checking on us. Before I could retort, Cadence, her voice laced with suspicion, pressed him on why he felt the need to check up on us. His response was startling. He said he didn't want to alarm us, but he was surprised to see people our age camping in this particular spot. He spoke of strange, unsettling events known to happen in this area. Freaky stuff, he repeated, his gaze intense. He claimed to have stumbled upon abandoned campsites deep in the forest, with belongings scattered as if people had simply vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. Despite my deep distrust, the calm, almost detached way he spoke made a part of me wonder if he was being sincere. He continued, saying he'd heard footsteps around his vehicle the previous night, and was cutting his trip short, leaving before darkness fully descended. He urged us to do the same. At that point, any urge to argue had evaporated. Cadence's fear was palpable. Staying was no longer an option. We began to frantically pack our belongings. The air crackled with tension as the last rays of sunlight began to fade. Cadence's hands trembled visibly as she loaded items into the truck, her composure cracking. I tried to reassure her, but my own heart hammered with a growing sense of dread. With everything finally crammed inside, I started the engine and pulled away without a backward glance. Twilight was deepening rapidly, and soon total darkness would envelop the forest. As I drove past Aiden's sight, a jolt of alarm went through me. His blue sedan was still there. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. I told him I couldn't, promising instead to contact emergency services as soon as I found a signal. I accelerated out of the campground, plunging into the dark service road, my headlights cutting twin beams into the deepening gloom. We had barely gone 100 yards when my eyes darted to the right, and I saw them. 3 silent forms stood amidst the trees, perhaps 30 feet from the road. Motionless, they seemed to make no effort to conceal themselves, almost as if they wished to be observed. Though it was only a fleeting glimpse, I was absolutely certain they were human figures. Cadence saw them too. My foot slammed on the brake pedal without conscious thought. I couldn't explain why. Perhaps a desperate instinct urged me to go back for Aiden, or maybe my mind simply struggled to comprehend the impossible sight. Prepare yourselves for a tale that reveals how even the most enchanting destination can shroud the darkest horrors. The rest of the drive to the main highway passed in a terrifying silence, broken only by the sound of the truck. The moment my phone caught a signal, I stopped the truck and dialed for help. I recounted the entire terrifying ordeal, and the dispatcher confirmed a team would be dispatched to check on Aiden. We never received an update, which deep down I hadn't truly expected. Yet a gnawing guilt persisted, a chilling certainty that something terrible had befallen Aiden, and that I carried a share of the blame. Cadence tried to soothe my conscience, suggesting he might have been part of some elaborate scheme, a possibility I considered, though I suspected it was more a desperate attempt to make sense of the horror. Regardless, that night's unsettling events still resurface in my thoughts, a dark shadow on the edge of memory. This next chapter begins 2 days later. I was 28, an IT consultant working remotely from Bozeman. The work itself was unremarkable, but the pay was decent, and the freedom to operate from anywhere was a significant perk. However, my personal life was a landscape of turmoil. My divorce, finalized 3 months prior, had left me adrift, and I was struggling profoundly to find my footing. Every attempt to mend my spirit failed. In hindsight, it seems a little reckless, but I became convinced that my only escape from perpetual despair was a radical change, something as extreme as disappearing into the wilderness for weeks. And so, that's precisely what I decided to do. Camping had always been my sanctuary, my escape. So venturing into the wild alone wasn't as outlandish as it might sound for someone less experienced. I'd been a scout my entire life, missing Eagle rank by a hair, but the core truth remained. I navigated the untamed world with a confidence most lacked, a skill passed down from my father. My deepest desire, however, was absolute solitude. Any hint of other human presence would utterly defeat the purpose of my desperate journey. I needed to be truly, utterly alone. Sure thing. So, in the dead of night, at 2 in the morning, when sleep refused to claim me, I did what anyone in my desperate state would. I dove deep into the internet's labyrinth. My search eventually led me to an obscure Montana backcountry camping forum, filled with cryptic discussions about unofficial, hidden sites within the Helena Lewis and Clark National Forest. In that moment, a decision crystallized. When dawn reluctantly broke, a cold, unyielding resolve hardened something within me, and I began to map the precise sequence of events. My brother was the only soul I confided in about my departure, and even to him, I offered only a vague outline of my destination, never revealing the precise spot. A substantial reserve of paid time off meant a week or so away from work wouldn't cause a ripple. If my memory serves, that decision was made on a Tuesday. By Thursday, my truck was packed to the brim. I'd provisioned myself for more than a week. Freeze-dried rations, purification tablets for water, a comprehensive first aid kit, and every other necessity for survival. And naturally, I carried a reliable means of defense. I'm no enthusiast of such things, but one simply doesn't venture so profoundly into the heart of the Montana wilderness without a way to protect oneself from the untamed creatures that reside there. The journey from Bozeman stretched for roughly 4 hours. The initial 3.5 were straightforward, a familiar progression from highway to county road, then onto a Forest Service track. But that final stretch became an absolute ordeal. My GPS, utterly bewildered, relentlessly attempted to redirect me. The crucial service road I sought simply non-existent in its digital maps. After agonizing backtracking and cross-referencing the cryptic details from those old online forums, I'd finally located an overgrown, barely discernible trail that seemed to align with the descriptions. Twice, I was forced to halt, clambering out to clear fallen branches and thick debris that entirely obstructed my path. My truck, a capable 4x4, handled it, but a prickle of anxiety began to form, a fear of becoming irrevocably stuck. I pressed onward, deeper and deeper, until the path became utterly impassable. There I cut the engine. I knew the reverse journey would be arduous, but I had anticipated such challenges. So for now, my concern was minimal. The moment my boots touched the ground, a surge of certainty told me I'd found my hidden sanctuary. Though in such profound wilderness, right felt relative. Every direction was equally remote. Still, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. Not far from where I'd parked, amidst a thick cluster of trees, a small clearing beckoned, a seemingly perfect spot to establish my solitary refuge. Except it wasn't empty. My gaze snagged on it almost instantly. An old olive-green tent, looking like a relic from decades past, already stood there. My planned solitude had been shattered. My initial thought was that another person had somehow stumbled upon these precise coordinates. But the tent itself seemed ancient, as if abandoned for decades. Visible mold bloomed across its fabric, an undeniable sign of long neglect. Compelled by a morbid curiosity, I approached, though a faint unease warned against it. I called out a friendly greeting, then waited. Only silence answered. The zipper was partly open, so I unfastened it the rest of the way. A wave of truly horrific stench assaulted me. A foul, decaying odor, thick with the smell of something long dead. It was repulsive, yet an irresistible urge to uncover the truth held me captive. Inside, I saw an empty sleeping bag, a few old soup cans, and a small notebook. I fought the overwhelming putridity just long enough to snatch the book and pull my head back into the fresh air. Nothing else was there, yet the source of that terrible smell remained a baffling, disturbing mystery. Outside, I opened the notebook. It was filled with page after page of tally marks, hundreds of them, meticulously grouped in sevens. The final page held 42 such groups, indicating a span of over 8 months. Far from fear, a strange excitement bubbled within me, a sense of having unearthed a compelling personal enigma. With nothing more to discover in its pages, I decided to keep the notebook. I then chose a spot on the far side of the clearing for my own camp, ensuring a good distance from the old tent, yet close enough to keep it constantly within my view. I felt an unsettling need to monitor it. As I set up, a chilling realization dawned. Despite the ancient tent, this clearing held no other trace of human presence. My extensive hike revealed no old fire rings, no scattered trash, no worn trails, no footprints, nothing to suggest anyone else had ever passed through. The night was remarkably clear, the stars a breathtaking spectacle in the vast dark sky. Exhausted by the long journey and the effort of setting up, I drifted into sleep almost immediately. I awoke abruptly, a sudden jolt in the dead of night. Though I couldn't tell the time, an undeniable certainty gripped me. I hadn't woken for no reason. As a deeply heavy sleeper even in the wild, I knew something was profoundly amiss. I froze, straining to hear over the pounding of my own heart, searching for the sound of an animal or whatever had disturbed my sleep. After a tense half-minute, I heard it. A low murmur of 2 or 3 distinct voices, seemingly just 20 feet from my tent. They were conversing, but their words were an indecipherable whisper. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. To venture so deep into the wilderness, seeking absolute solitude, only to encounter other people, multiple people, was a terrifying invasion. It might not sound inherently frightening, but in that moment, absolute panic seized me. I remained utterly still within my sleeping bag, feigning sleep. The voices fell silent, but I dared not move. Moments later, soft footsteps began to circle my tent. A chilling realization dawned. Whoever was out there was stalking my camp, moving with the predatory grace of a creature hunting its prey. My hand instinctively sought my means of defense. A decision validated mere seconds later when someone began violently tugging at my tent zipper. The clips I'd secured held fast, and after a moment of frustrated effort, the pulling ceased. I held my protection ready, a desperate urge to act rising within me. I expected them to simply retreat, but they didn't. Instead, a chilling scratching began on the tent flap, as if they were trying to tear their way inside. That sound, that relentless, invasive scratching, shattered my composure. My voice, though trembling, cut through the night a fierce command for them to retreat. The scratching stopped abruptly. After a chilling hush, I heard them scatter, a flurry of footsteps rushing off into the darkness, each in a different direction. It sounded like at least 3 distinct movements, a thought far more terrifying than just 2. Their fractured retreat, not a single unified flight, struck me as profoundly unnatural. Sleep was a fleeting visitor that night, but a sense of uneasy security settled over me, knowing my means of defense lay close at hand. With the first hint of dawn, I unzipped my tent and emerged, making a deliberate display of readiness, asserting my presence in the unsettling quiet. My gaze instantly flew to where the ancient mildewed tent had stood. It was gone. I strode to the precise spot, my mind reeling. There was no impression in the earth. No trace of stakes, nothing. Not even a blade of grass appeared disturbed. Yet I knew it had been there. A solid presence I'd observed for hours the day before. What I did find sent a fresh wave of ice through me. Bare human footprints, scores of them, encircling my campsite in a wide, uneven ring, perhaps 20 feet out. Their varied sizes confirmed my darkest suspicion. Far more than just 2 individuals had been lurking. Some prints were disturbingly deep, suggesting a prolonged, silent vigil. A single trail of prints led to a massive pine at the clearing's edge. I followed, and there they were, fresh, stark cuts in the bark. I recognized them instantly, those chilling tally marks. 7 complete groups of 7, and the beginning of an 8th. Just like the journal, I stood frozen, grappling with the impossible implications. The journal had documented something for over 8 months. Now, new marks appeared on this tree, mere steps from my tent. I desperately fought against understanding their terrible message. But then, as I recoiled from the tree, I saw something else, something that made my stomach churn. It remains the most sickening sight I have ever witnessed. From a low branch, just a few feet away, hung a small, lifeless creature, suspended by what appeared to be a thin cord. I'm not easily disturbed by the natural cycle of life and death in the wild, but the deliberate, unnatural way this creature was displayed sent a wave of profound revulsion through me. It was a clear, chilling signal. I bolted back to my campsite, my movements a frantic blur as I began tearing down my setup. I'm here to help with any questions or information you need. How can I assist you today? After an eternity of terror, I finally crammed everything away and sprinted towards my truck. I flung my gear inside, leaped into the driver's seat, and immediately began to reverse. A cold fear whispered that my tires would be sabotaged, but to my immense relief, the truck remained unharmed. The overgrown path, already a challenge, became an agonizing obstacle course in reverse. The entire ordeal was sheer torment, a living nightmare, but I persevered, and I believe I escaped unseen. Once I finally reached home, the thought of contacting anyone felt utterly futile. What could I even say? Who would realistically venture into that deep, remote wilderness to investigate such a bizarre tale? But even now, what haunts me most is that grotesque display. No one creates such a thing without intending a chilling warning. I shudder to think what might have unfolded if I had remained another night, or if I hadn't possessed a means to protect myself.